Hello, welcome to the Quad
Won't you lend your lungs to me?
Podcast.
Mine are collapsing. Plant my feet and bitterly breathe up the time that's passed. Breath I'll take and breath I'll give. Pray the day's not poised. Stand among the ones that live in lonely indecision.
All right, welcome to Crackpot Podcast, episode 55. Thank you for joining us, James. Thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon, Lynn.
Good afternoon. James, you're in Portland for the time being, but your residency is soon to come to conclude, and you're going to be heading back east. Is that right?
Yes, my Sasquatch passport has expired for now. Actually, a couple of my fighters have a bout coming up in Philadelphia in 2 weeks, so I need to be back there to assist them.
Okay.
I was out of it last week when we were supposed to podcast, and also when my favorite living author passed away. So I couldn't sleep last night, which requires me to apologize for standing you up by like 5 hours this morning. That is not morning anymore.
Yeah.
But I did read the novel, The Citadel of the Autarch, which means the fortress of the self-ruler.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth book of The New Sun by James LaFond. James LaFond was a combat infantryman in Korea and won the combat infantryman's citation for that. But here's one of those rare insights that's humorous, and he seemed to be a man that had a lot of compassion for the unborn people of the future, kind of like a time traveler's compassion, but he's spending some time discussing crime and time, and he finds out as he's being inducted into the leadership of this future society that he's surprised that they would want him because he's a criminal. The leader that's outgoing says to him, well, we are criminals, that's why we do this. I am also a criminal, just as you are. Then the narrative voice steps back. There is no limit to stupidity. Space itself is said to be bounded by its own curvature, but stupidity continues beyond infinity. So that's, he's using that so big one, the real brief quote. The novel itself starts out with this. I had never seen war or even talked of it at length with someone who had, but I was young and knew something of violence, and so believed that war would be no more than a new experience for me, as other things, the possession of authority and threats, say, or my escape from the house absolute, had been new experiences. He gives descriptions of a twilight world that's been bombed to smithereens and closes 3 paragraphs later with this. I continued to stand there for a watch or more, rewarded from time to time with these mysterious light. At last, having satisfied myself that they were a great way off and came no nearer, and that they did not appear to change in frequency, coming on average with each 500th beat of my heart, I lay down, and because I was then thoroughly awake, I became aware that the ground was shaking very slightly beneath me. That was the first and last passage of a newcomer's initiation to a war zone that, although the mechanics of it were mostly that of like ancient combat, there was artillery present.
Thank you for reading that. Gene Wolfe died, was it Monday a week ago?
I don't know. I was sitting here cross-legged in the dark with my sunglasses on, and a couple of nice people sent me a text on his flip phone telling me he passed away, but
April 14th.
couldn't see well enough to get to the cafe and upload a post, so I waited till now.
For those that don't know, James has been suffering from what's called cluster headaches, although you don't feel it as a headache, right? You feel it as more concentrated in your eye.
Well, it's
Pain.
not a headache at all to me. It just feels like Odin's trying to get his eye back. So it's just like a severe seizure of the right eye, which, like right now, is bad enough that it's causing the other eye to squint shut. So, Portland's actually the kind of place where you can walk around in this condition. Which I did. I sprained my ankle. I'm no yogi. I can't sit cross-legged forever and meditating about all the shit I haven't done yet. So I actually stumble-bummed around town. People held doors open for me, didn't treat me like a leper. In Baltimore, I probably would have been killed like 23 times in the period that I went out for one exercise. I would have no doubt heard the whistling of the spears before they sank into my flesh. I can imagine the various troops of hood rats fighting over my body as they rolled me into the gutter. I guess there's a lot of kind of like law and order types that aren't liberal in mind that listen to our podcast. When you're not physically doing well, it's pretty nice being around all these sissy liberals because they're no threat. They've already done the White Rabbit Express from whenever it was threatening them elsewhere. And as much as I took pride in the Harm City hood rats, hunting me to near extinction and making something of a man out of me in the process, in weak times, it's kind of nice to be amongst these soft, pale faces that hold the door open for you while you're stumbling across the parking lot, as opposed to stopping what they're doing and tapping their bro on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, yo, dude, don't look too good. Let's go take your shit." Okay, so there you go. I'm in good hands, and Portland has just been so great for writing.
You've written really huge quantities, and you always promise to bury me in books, but you finished like 8 or 9 books, at least 7 books while you were out here.
I looked at it. I've completed 9 books while I was here between January 27 and April 5. Of those, 4 were already in progress, and those were all the daunting projects. One of them, it was just a matter of me writing a foreword and an afterword, and then arranging 95 articles in book form and sending it off to you. So it's in a tedious category. The 5 things that I started out here were all projects that were roughly like 96 pages apiece. And that's something that, Robert E. Howard would write something like that in a night. I'll do it in 2 or 3 days. L. Ron Hubbard would do it every day for a month. It's not any feat of typing, which is something I can't even do, and it's not even something that took many hours, even though I only type about 16 words a minute. My mother typed like 100 words a minute. Was that when I looked at the time, when I wrote American Dreamboat in a 32-hour period, that's the last book that I finished, and I only spent like 12 hours writing that in those 32 hours. So even then, that day and a half period, most of that time, I took walks and, looked at the clouds and read and talked to the dog and pretended I had something that he wanted to hear, to say, and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't like some huge amount of work. It was just the fact that I'm doing this full time. I'm not doing anything else. So even since I stopped working a part-time grocery gig at night, instead of spending 10 hours a day writing like I did when I was doing that, I now only write for like 6 hours a day. But I have more time to read and think. So I walk around and think about what I've read. So I haven't been working my ass off. It's just, the social conditions have been solitary for me. So it enabled me to spend a lot of time doing something that most people wouldn't regard as work. Okay, so I'm really sick of talking about my writing and my work. What do we have to discuss today on writing?
We have a whole bunch of things that I've set aside because we have sort of been trying to podcast for about a month and haven't been able to do it. I set aside a bunch of things, and you have dropped a few topics on me as well.
Okay, let's scratch the French Revolution in San Domingo. We'll do that another time. I also think maybe let's save the history of dueling and Catholic boxing until we can talk to Sam Finlay.
Okay, good.
In person. All right. Okay, so there is my nerderies out of the way. How has the world passed me by, my dear?
Okay, what's been going on? Well,
month?
Yesterday was Easter Sunday. Today's Monday, April 22nd, and there was.
Yeah. Wow, it seemed like a long while ago. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there were a series of bombings at Christian churches in Sri Lanka yesterday, and the death toll for that is at about 290 right now.
Well, if they had not blamed the Cathedral of Notre Dame on a janitorial mishap, then maybe the people that did that wouldn't have had to go bomb these churches in Sri Lanka to get everybody's attention. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so that was a current event. I don't know, politics is just kicking around. It's the Democrats' primary season, and the Mueller report came out.
Okay. When I think of Mueller, as a grocer, the worst-selling pasta was Mueller's spaghetti. It's a white box with blue tags on the end, and we used to dread getting this stuff on sale because it would always be stuck with it. You have these long, squishy boxes that never stacked right. So I'm sorry. That's all hopefully that brand is like extinct and nobody carries it anymore. I don't tell people we're thinking German pasta.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's nothing but like fat Italian babes on designer, like Art Deco covers now on the pasta.
That's probably true.
So what happens? He's like this reptilian dude. I saw a picture of him
Mueller
leaning across a desk before.
Oh, well, one funny thing that happened was that yesterday he was at church and the MSNBC people were there trying to get him to answer questions. So harassing him at church, I thought that was funny. But I'm kind of tired of it. I don't know. I mean, it's just not. Basically, nothing happened. There was no Russian collusion. Mueller would have known that from the start. Would have been pretty obvious pretty early on in the investigation, but he kept it going for 2 years. And here we are. I don't know. I just, in terms of news stories, Notre Dame, burned. And it turns out the damage at Notre Dame was not as bad as it could have been. The roof.
I mean, they weren't building with like pressed particle board IKEA stuff back then. So the stone was okay.
It was pretty. Yeah, the stone is pretty solid, and even some of the windows survived. So they're really beautiful, and hopefully, what the fear is now is that they're going to put some kind of glass and steel monstrosity on top of it instead of a normal wooden roof like what it should have and what it used to have. They're going to put some kind of skyscraper hat on it, and it's going to be really ugly. So then people will wish for it to burn properly. A man named Nipsey Hussle was killed, and I just have to laugh at this story because he's some kind of hip-hop guy, and all of a sudden it was a big deal.
I listened to Louis Farrakhan's speech for him at his funeral.
Oh, you did? How was that?
Yes. I have Black Muslim Nation of Islam connections.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I listened to Farrakhan's eulogy.
Were you moved by it?
Yeah, I was swaying on top of the 5-gallon bucket that I sit on in the kitchen of Yeti Waters, and every 5.5 beats, I said, "That's right." That's right.
Oh, that reminds me that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was giving a speech in some I don't know if she was actually in a black church or some group of black people, and she started doing a little bit of that black preacher cadence.
I just want to see. I'm sorry. I did see the little video of her dancing and stuff, and if she's even a shadow of her former self, I say that we should have a presidential swimsuit calendar. And I think Trump will probably carry it around with him. Say like, you know what, this is.
Oh dear.
This is a proper use of assets. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's not. I'm just trying to remember the stories of the last few weeks. That
it's just that you discuss these women in power positions with me, and since we're not online anymore, you never have a chance to send me a picture or video image of your true qualifications. So, but this is one where I've actually studied her gyrating on the roof of some building.
Yeah,
so
she's cute.
I have some idea of her intellectual capacity. I was impressed.
I'm disappointed in myself because I wanted to write about this because really she is a lovely young lady. She's not very smart, okay? I mean, she, for example, she said that Republicans passed an amendment to stop Franklin Roosevelt from running for president again, and that's a pretty huge error of American history. And so, but anyway, go ahead.
You're endearing her to me further. I mean, she's a lovely-looking young lady with a nice body, and she's dumb as a box of rocks. She sounds adorable. Can you send her over?
No, I'm not trying to change your mind in any way. What I'm really trying to say is that it's really a waste of her gifts, and I think you'll agree with me because politics will ruin her, and it's already done it. You can already see that she's aging and, kind of just squandering her charms. And her charms are what have gotten her whatever measure of success that she has, because she's now clashing up against Nancy Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi is really canny and wily and did you know that Nancy Pelosi came from Baltimore?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and so she learned from her father, who I think was mayor of Baltimore, and of really how politics works and the horse trading and holding grudges and things like this. And I don't think AOC is canny enough to have the staying power that Nancy Pelosi has had. And so really it's just going to be kind of the ruin of this nice young lady who should have done something else.
The mother dowager of the Democratic Party is going to swoop down upon her like some pterodactyl.
Yeah, she's been slapping her around in public already because she has to keep her little minions in line.
None of this is very interesting to me, but I like to see the images of what's happening to our womanhood. I mean, there's not much manhood on the stage out there.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I'm happy with the political situation.
Right. And speaking of manhood on the stage, this big conundrum for the Democratic Party is that it's simply not okay for a white guy to run for president as a Democrat. So Joe Biden.
Yeah, but what if he?
Yeah.
Can't they find a white guy that has sex with black dudes or something?
Well,
I mean, would that qualify? I mean, I thought that was like
there is a
kind of like the default get along.
Yeah.
To be along kind of
Well,
thing.
there is a gay guy, Pete. I can't say. I'm not gonna say his last name, but
okay.
he. Well, he has a last name that's not really possible to say correctly, and I'm not gonna try. So he is a veteran. I can't remember what exactly he served, but
was he in the U.S.
He was
tonsil hockey squadron?
He was something, and it's broken. Anyway, he's a homosexual, and the things you already see about him is like, is this diverse enough? You know, he's a white guy and he's gay, but is that really doing it for us anymore? So you have Joe Biden, you have the homo dude, and then you have also Bernie Sanders, who of course is Jewish, not exactly white, and then everybody else is like a person of diversitude of more importance. So
a person of diversitude, I like that.
Yeah.
The God Emperor is basically going to be like Dennis the Menace at the carnival when it comes to dealing with this crowd. Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, we're not paying very close attention to that. But I wanted to go back to Nipsey Hussle because there's certain things that happened. For example, they had a procession for him, and one person was killed and multiple people were shot. They had a vigil for him before that, and at least 6 people were stabbed at the Nipsey Hussle vigil. And I think that was basically like a stampede situation there as well. And then during his funeral motorcade, one of the vehicles was tossing money out the window.
Well, those people have not forgotten their Irish heritage. So I'm glad to hear that. Actually, pretty thrilled.
Yeah.
That's a wake.
That's a proper wake. You have to have some stabbings and some
shootings.
Some shootings and a stampede.
Discarded currency. Yeah. That's good. I'm happy. Thank you. That made my week. I did. I also enjoyed the Honorable Reverend Louis Farrakhan's stuff.
Yes.
I feel complete.
You always feel uplifted when you hear him talk. Oh, Jared Taylor got banned from Europe, deported from Europe. He wrote a letter from the Zurich airport. And you just can't have somebody like Jared Taylor running around and causing problems like that in Europe. So.
Well, that's just I love that. That's the irony there. I mean, he's the guy that's trying to make the case that what really matters and postmodern life is trying to preserve European modernity. They kicked him out. That's like. That's like a whorehouse getting rid of its barker, for talking about the charms of the ladies inside. So I just love irony. That's great. You've uplifted me yet further.
Yeah, I figured.
Particularly after Jared Taylor's misreading of the Jamestown situation. I saw him give a speech to men I think it was in Germany or Scandinavia, where he was using the example of Jamestown to describe how people of different races could not live together in harmony. And he gives the example of the governor of Jamestown Colony fighting one of the colonists because his dog snarled at a visiting Indian. And then a year later, the Indians rise up and try to slaughter all these people. Well, there was a reason why the dog was snarling at the Indian, because the Indian was the slave catcher And most of the white men in that colony were the slaves of the rich white men who gave garnets, powder, and lead shot to the Indians in return for rounding up the runaway white boys and sending them back to their white masters.
Okay. But you mentioned the dog and the Indian, so I want to tell you
Yeah,
something else. And
at the time, the Indians were heavily mixed race people. There was even people coming straight on a boat from London who were totally in fear of the idea of the plantations because it was the hell they sent you to die in on Earth. The first thing they would do is run for the woods and try to join the Indians. And it looks like what the Indians did is they kept the best ones, the ones that they wanted the most, and then they'd bring back the rejects to get their guns and powder and everything that way. You know, it's like a mixed race refugee community. You know, Pocahontas' father had a beard, for God's sake. So it was funny how that was. I was just poking fun at Mr. Taylor because he took modern race sensibilities that were crafted in the 1860s and tried to apply them in front of a European crowd to a mixed race class warfare situation, and that was overlaid with a culture warfare situation from like 400 years before that, or 300 years before that, and apply it.
But James, you have to admit, because now, as you spoke at the beginning, you're in Portland, and it's kind of easy to live in Portland, right? People are kind of nice to you, you know, so it's not wrong to say that that's a nice way to live and that's how we want to live.
Oh, but that's not how they were living in Jamestown. In Jamestown, it was a brutal reign of terror, oppression, and toil. Almost everybody died in their first 2 years.
Yeah.
They were primarily killed by their own overseers and masters. Once you got to the Indians, once you were taken into one of the many tribes that made up the Powhatan Confederation, they didn't kill you. They didn't kill their own people. They were way up for like wiping out other people's people. Okay, there's a lot of this was the dynamic that you saw in plantation America, is that in the colony, in the slave colony, which is usually called a plantation, in Jamestown, most of the people that died were killed by their own. You had tens of thousands killed by their English masters, and only a few hundred killed by the Indian enemies. And all you read about is a few hundred that were killed by the Indian enemies.
All right.
The Indians weren't killing any of their own people in their tribe. You didn't kill the people in your tribe. You killed enemy people. So given a choice, the lower class people who were being killed by the upper class people in droves took their chances as often as they could running to the Indians to try to join them, because there was at least the succor of a gang. You know, there was your gang, your tribe would look out for you, and if you were part of the tribe and you did not betray the tribe, they weren't even going to beat you up, let alone kill you. But if you're part of the English system, if you didn't grow enough tobacco, they beat your ass to death, even though you were loyal to the governor, the king, whatever. So that was really what you saw, was what Taylor was presented as a white versus red situation was really a pale versus painted situation in our political memory, but on the ground, it was an English on English class warfare situation where the survivors on the bottom rung would escape to the Indians, and it seems like one of the main impetuses of the Indian attacks on the English plantation was the disaffection of the escaped English. In fact, when the English eventually won this war, the Third War in 1644, one of their terms is they had to return the, quote, captives. The captives didn't want to go back. They weren't captives. They were adopted, and they were fighting against the people they had escaped from. Okay, so what they were doing is they were getting the traitors back so they could re-enslave those traitors that had joined the enemy of, not the English people, but they joined the enemy of the plantation system. The plantation system was what ate the English people. There's a letter home from this boy in 1721 who had been sold by his parents, and he was asking for them to send some cheese to him because he was starving, and the servants had been given weapons to fight off the Indians. He noted in there that they could never tell if they were being attacked by the Indians until the Indians were right on top of them, because they could not tell the Indians apart from the English.
Mm.
And the words he used to describe the English was the vagabonds. So you couldn't tell the attacking Indians apart from the pillaging runaways at this point. Right here, and of course, on the upper level, you've already had a royal marriage between Pocahontas and Rolfe, who was one of the lead planners. Even after the English kidnapped this chick, she married into their group. So this was not, what Taylor was describing was not seen as a racial situation. Even at the time, it was seen as a way of coexistence between a tribal group that would act as military allies and border security for a slave plantation. Okay, this was, this had really nothing to do with race. And when I get to the Paleface book, you'll see that there was a lot of mixed race unions. These were already mixed race people when John Smith landed, bearded chiefs and so on. They weren't red. They just painted themselves red to keep the mosquitoes off of them. Okay, so I'm sorry. I went down another Plantation America rabbit hole.
Yeah,
but
we always do.
But there's something ironic that, the guy that his shtick is the only thing that matters is the European racial legacy, gets kicked out by the Europeans, who can correctly be termed suicidal. It seems like a lot of Europeans don't want their race to survive. But he's also, the talk I saw him give explaining American racial politics to this German group was scandalously shallow in the research. He didn't look at the footnotes of any of the books that he was working from, and he misrepresented them.
Okay, that's fair enough. I can easily agree that there was a lot more going on than the sort of founding myths that we have all learned about Jamestown, and it's even interpreted by libertarians as a proof that socialism always fails and stuff like that. So, there's the whole use of Jamestown as like a communist model. Right.
No, it was a military death camp. That was.
It
was.
That's also a communist type. I mean, that fits into a communist model in a way.
Yeah,
right?
But its purpose was economic. They were there to extract wealth out of the ground. Anyhow, let's get on. I addressed. We don't even have to get into the Pilgrims thing because I addressed that in the Easter Tweaker history that I wrote on Easter. Okay,
yeah.
the history of the Easter Tweaker.
The hoppers.
Okay,
yeah.
Which, right. Well, in Baltimore he's the hopper, but out west here he would be the tweaker. So, people can find that online to get their history of the Pilgrims there and what Squanto did. So what do you have next?
Well, you mentioned about the dogs growling, and this is something that made that I found on Twitter also. Somebody's writing here. Dogs are a tool of white supremacy and gentrification. That's not just my opinion. There's research that shows how white newcomers' dog walking routes stake out territory. I love that. You're staking out territory with dog poop, basically. And white owners use their pets to socialize with other white owners, excluding minorities. Meanwhile, if black dog owners would show up in white neighborhoods, they'd be surveilled and harassed. Is that true? Do white gentrifiers stake out territory?
Okay, well, here's an anecdote. This really happened around 2001. Our 6'5", 450-pound security guard lost a bare-knuckle fight to the Mac Daddy, who was 5'11", 320. I refereed this fight in the milk cooler of the Shoppers Supermarket at Lawrence and Ford Avenue.
I should find it for you to read it. Yeah.
And the big man was so depressed that he lost to the smaller giant, T-Rex lost to Triceratops, that he asked me for boxing lessons in the park. This man's shoes were like the size of my torso. So I'm walking with him in the park, and it's when, at this point, 60% of the people down there, maybe 70, were all gentry that had moved in. So Riverside Park, which is a place where white trash kids used to play, had become the dog defecation capital of Baltimore. It was now just a place where hipsters and yuppies took their designer dogs to defecate. And we're walking up there, and I'm literally like, here I am, 5'8", 143 pounds. This guy's 6'5", 450. Predatory homosexual. Okay, seriously. He'd come into the bathroom while you're at the urinal and whisper in your ear about what he wanted to do with you. Right? Yeah, he was a creepy dude. This lady with her beehive hairdo, who was like, I guess she was like some kind of ancient hipster homesteader, because she was like in her 50s. Her little poodle got away, and this is like a teacup poodle. It runs up yipping at this guy. This man tries to climb me, like the Green Giant trying to climb Jack's beanstalk. He's standing on one of my feet with his size 18. He's got the other foot on top of it. He's hugging me. My back's about to snap in half. And he's trying to climb me higher, but unfortunately I'm a lot shorter than he is, so he can't really get any altitude. And he's looking down at the dog in terror, and he's rolling his eyes at the little old lady, and he says, "Is it a good dog? Is it a good dog?" And I'm like, dude, it just thinks you're walking around in its future apartment. That thing could live in your shoe, man. Could probably raise a family in your shoe. And then we proceed with our boxing lesson once we get to the abandoned basketball court. But that's an area where they actually tore the basketball nets out of the basketball court to keep the black guys from coming into the neighborhood to play basketball, because they would sometimes shoot each other, whenever they'd have a disagreement about the basketball game. And then we would use these types of basketball courts for our sparring and practice, but you couldn't, play ball on the field or anything, and you couldn't go out and spar on the grass because it was nothing but dog shit.
Yeah.
And the one thing that these white hipsters do when they come into a neighborhood is they propagate rats, because rats, and Baltimore has the third largest rat population in the Western Hemisphere, okay, of Norway rats, behind Boston and New York. New York's first, but we're punching above our weight there. The rats will eat dog feces. And it was just really these rich white people were nasty with their designer dogs, just like shitting all over the place. So I could see why now. Yeah, the black folks in Baltimore had their own problems with raising dogs for to guard their drug stashes and stuff like that. And things would get loose and eat the faces of little children and stuff like that. But, so it was kind of like there wasn't like a good dog balance in Baltimore, and so yeah, I could see that, and so maybe raising these pit bulls to be bloodthirsty killers is kind of like a reaction to this gentrification conquest, but I have posited elsewhere that it was a way for the younger children to chase down the tweakers, okay, and the crackheads and stuff like that, and get the candy they were stealing from the supermarkets.
Yeah.
Sorry, another digression, but yeah, so that's funny. That reminds me of a horror movie I saw about a white dog that he looked like a husky, and in this like late 70s movie, this dog like just had to attack black people because it was like descended from like these slave catching dogs.
I've heard many reports, but I've never seen it of the dogs just naturally being hostile towards African Americans.
Okay, well, this is what really happens. Dogs are hostile to people of races other than their owners. As a white trash dude walking through black neighborhoods, every one of them dogs wanted to rip my throat out. And
But are the dogs also friendly to black strangers? They would not note it, treat a black stranger the same way.
They're friendly to them as long as they're fed. Yeah. But yeah, you'll see a dog, and I've seen it many times, just playing with little kids in the backyard. This pit bull that could like bite their head off and eat it like a jawbreaker. And it would let these kids hit it with sticks and everything, and like they were the little kings of this big monster thing. They could have killed them. And as soon as that thing would see me, it wanted to kill me because I was from a different race. These dogs have a 17 times better sense of smell, something like that, than humans do. And like if you've been an athlete and you've like spent times as a white dude wrestling with black guys, white guys and black guys smell noticeably different once we start like hitting each other and wrestling with each other, okay? We smell different just to us, and we're humans with a poor sense of smell. This dog can smell a lot better than us. So yeah, they're used to the smell of one race of people, and they don't like the smell of another race of people. This is almost always the case. I've seen black dudes walking through a white neighborhood, and all the dogs go nuts, and white guys walking through a black neighborhood, and all the dogs go nuts because it's a stranger. And people probably want to think that the dogs have just picked up the racial prejudice of their owners or something. And that might be true, but I think the dogs just don't like the wrong smelling kind of ape. I think there's a lot of trust there that's embedded in their smell. And then in a mixed race neighborhood, you got everything going on because you're mixing social classes and different types of dogs, and there in those situations, like in neighborhoods in Baltimore County that are now like 50-50 neighborhoods, the dogs are pretty much used to everybody, and they don't treat anybody any different on a racial basis.
Well, that's good to know.
Okay, but in a neighborhood where it's like almost all white, they go nuts over the black guy. Neighborhood where it's almost all black, they go nuts over the white guy. Maybe the dogs are the real racist here, and we're just like their smelly automatons.
We're doing their bidding somehow. I had another bookmark here for you. I think this is really in your area of interest. Cardi B is a celebrity. I think she's a rapper or musician or something, performer. She's famous for shaking her rear end in the signature dance move, the twerking move. She does it.
Oh, she can do that. I don't even need to see a picture. Okay.
So she's very athletic, okay?
Yeah, she's been invited to the yurt officially.
She used to be a stripper, and so she's on trial, or I'm not sure what's going on. It says she rejected a plea deal, so she's in some kind of negotiation, I guess. But she was a stripper, and she used to drug and rob the men in the strip club. Does that happen a lot? Do you have any anecdotes?
I actually, yes.
Just make one up if you don't have one.
I'm sorry, I almost called you dude. That's
That
quite
happens to me a lot.
incongruent. Okay. See, I'm already picking up this hippie diction from.
Oh, that's what it is. It's the West Coast thing.
Oh yeah, these people in Portland, the women will be talking to each other and go, "Hey, dude."
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you the brief version. Okay, this exists as a story, a real true story, on a website that doesn't have my name attached to it. Okay.
Okay.
This is an under-the-radar website that some of our private readers know about. I was in an East Coast state. I had just come in from the Rocky Mountains. A friend of mine is highly connected in the strip club world, takes me to a strip club. And like, they bring out a stack of money and give it to him. And they, like, send these beautiful, like, hooker babes out that swarm all over us. And he gives me a stack of money that some dude gives him. And he, and like, none of these women are American. Like Colombian and Venezuelan and Russian. And I don't know, there must be some Brazilian, with like chicks with like Asian hair, German faces, and
yeah, they have
African
laboratories.
bodies. I mean, yeah. And I'm being swarmed by these jiggle pop creatures, and he likes the Russian chicks. This like woman that looks like an assassin in some James Bond movie is like whispering in his ear, I could love you or I could kill you, that kind of stuff. And he seems to be into that. And he actually dances with them. It's a dude that's like he gets out there and just dances with people. He's a good dancer. So there's a certain point where this one girl keeps trying to get me to like go to some back room with her, and it's like it's okay. Her boss is going to take care of it. I've been introduced as like a famous writer. Okay. So apparently I'm like real money on the hook in their eyes, because to them a writer is somebody who makes money. It's, not to us, it's somebody that's basically living in a garage. So the women become more and more interested in me. Two of them try to get me to go. I mean, you couldn't call it seduction. It's like, the girl that was detailed to seduce me was very sweet. I just couldn't believe the proportions. Like, they put all that together in one body, and she looks up at me, and she's like, it was really kind of cute and creepy that she had the English of a 3-year-old and, like, the body of, like, a 20-year-old Jennifer Lopez. And she looks up at me, she's like, "You never seen no woman before?" I said, "Well, not one like you." And so anyways, she starts looking at my hands and my eyes, and she's like, "Where are you from? Like, what kind of weird white person am I?" She was treating me like some kind of weird animal that was trapped for its nifty pale pelt. And I go to the bathroom, and I come back, and there are 2 shots of Jägermeister on the bar. And Jägermeister will make me deathly ill as soon as I take a shot. I just can't drink it. It's like, it reminds me of my mother forcing, children's cough syrup down my throat when I was a kid. I just won't do it. So I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, I can't. This stuff will make me sick. I can't drink it. He's like, look, I can drink a half a dozen of these things, no problem. I'll drink both of them. Okay? He drinks both of them. Now, we've both just had 2 beers. That's it. Mm-hmm. And he sweated his 2 beers out dancing. And this is over a few yards. This is over. Yeah, this is weird. Yeah, I end up going to a strip club with a dude who does more dancing than any of the chicks. But he's a super cool guy. Well, either one of us could drink like 10 drinks and be okay and be easily functional. Well, so he's 4 drinks in, and I'm 2 drinks in, and I go to use the bathroom again because of my aging bladder, and the way these girls are grabbing at me, I'm afraid that they're going to end up having to bring me a Depends or something if they mess up with any of the tubing. So I come back, and he's in a cold sweat, and he's cramped up bending over the bar, and right then I look at this beautiful Colombian girl with black hair who looks like a stone cold killer is working behind the bar, and she's giving me the darkest look that I've ever been given by a woman. Okay, that I hadn't broken up with. And I hadn't even gotten to know this chick yet. And then she stays away from me. She gives me this really dark look, and she stays away from me. That's the girl that served those drinks.
Oh.
I was friends with two of the bouncers. They're both fighters, okay? Because this is the second time I had been in this place. And the first time, I just ignored the chicks, and I spent time talking to the bouncers, and that's how you do it. And I was a coach, and I used to be a fighter, and they used to be fighters. So I made actual friends with these dudes. I said, look, my friend, we need to get him out of here. We need to get a cab. So they call him a cab. And it's a strange town. I don't know my way around. But eventually, the cab gets us back to this guy's place. So, yeah, what do I think was going on there is that guy drank my roofie because, remember, he's busy dancing with Russian chicks, and I got with these genetically engineered Dominican and Brazilian babes crawling all over me. And you know what? They're big, strong girls. None of them are little. I like Viking chicks, okay? I mean, so, like, I think the one was, like, 6'2", 180, and like, the Jennifer Lopez chick could have probably, like, scissored me and snapped my back. I mean, she had eyes like Earl Campbell, who's NFL Hall of Famer. You know? So, yeah, I think that I had been targeted for one of those situations. So if Judge LaFond was hearing this case, he would have that young lady set back in the chambers by herself, so he could do a proper interrogation.
Right.
Okay. I hope I saved all the identities there. By the way, the young lady's name was Ruby. I do not believe for a minute she was going to be the one that was going to harm me or rob me. She was going to be. She was going to be the one in charge of compromising me.
I'll just say that, you know, your brain, and this is not you personally, but when there's a pretty girl around, you know, you can't rely on men to have good judgment. It's just simple. And
my judgment was impeccable. I got a cab.
You got a cab.
But we got out of the LZ.
You
did the evac.
You saved the day. You did the right thing, but the fact that you still sort of hold out this woman as somehow innocent, it just proves that you know you don't really.
So she was like a circus before. Yeah, the more I think about it, she probably could have just killed me herself. Yeah, okay.
These are all assassins. They're like fembots. They're fembots
right,
from. This is how long it's been since I've watched movies. Okay, it was Austin Powers. Yes.
Right. So what happens is I get out of there with half of that money because I got my money in my pocket that was like given to me, you know,
that you were supposed to be tipping the ladies.
Right.
Yeah.
I end up with this random wad of 1s and 5s in my front pocket, and those pants end up getting like, they were unlucky pants, okay, that I had worn from when this black bear, they were same unwashed cargo shorts that I had on when this black bear was following me through the Smith and Morehouse Canyon when I was picking rose hips. And then when these Dominican chicks were like, you know, zeroing in on me. So I consider them bad luck. I just put them in my backpack. Well, when I get back to Baltimore and it's, I think, Thanksgiving, I undo these pants, and there's still this wad of like stripper money in these cargo shorts.
Nice.
So I gave it to my 6-year-old grandson as
get him started early.
And my daughter-in-law takes this wad of money and looks at it. She's like, "You're giving my son a wad of partially used stripper bills?" I said, "Look,
she sniffed it out right away.
Yeah. I say, "Look, you know, that's
the
lucky money. That's lucky money, okay?" And I'll tell him the story when he's old enough to appreciate it. So, yeah.
Cute.
Okay. All right.
All right. This has happened, I believe this has happened twice in Chicago. I'm not sure, but I think so. An angry mob forced a Chicago cop to release a handcuffed drug suspect on Sunday afternoon. By Tuesday morning, the department had still not arrested the escapee. And then I think this happened another time where the mob forced the cops to release a guy, and they even were able to remove the drugs from the car. That they had already grabbed some drugs
It
off his
happens every
stuff.
week in Baltimore.
That no, but that the
Uh,
mobs like force the cops to let a guy go. That happens every week.
yeah, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and it started right after the riots. What you ended up with in Baltimore starting in July of 2015 is if you're going to, you would normally send 2 or 3 cops, 2 cops, and then the supervisor coming in his own car to like arrest one dude. It's just like, maybe he's got a warrant on him or something like that, some guy on the street, whatever. Not kicking in the door, they sent in a tactical squad. Well, it got to the point by July of 2015 in Baltimore that you could not send any number of uniformed cops into West Baltimore to arrest any black man unless you also sent a tactical squad. Basically the military, the Israeli border patrol type of guys. Yeah. I mean, you needed like bare minimum of 5 cops to even get one dude, because you need 2 for the guy, and then the other ones, 3 didn't even turn out to be enough for perimeter security, so you had to bring in tactical squads. They just weren't one-on-one calls in West Baltimore, and then the murders just started going through the roof because everybody knew they could settle scores and take care of business and practice community policing without the interference of the BPD, because there was only 2 tactical squads in the whole department, and one of them was going to be kicking in the door at 4 in the morning. Those guys had to get their testosterone rest during the day. So daytime Baltimore 2015, they could only do like 1 arrest a day.
Wow.
Because they only had like the 1 tactical squad to send out to like secure the block, and it might just be for like open container, or the guy got in an argument with his girlfriend or something like that. Some really lame stuff, but you still had to send a tactical squad. So it's one. Yeah, but you can find this shit all over like World Star Hip Hop and stuff.
Yeah.
And for a while you could find it on YouTube, but it's something that nobody tries to publicize, because neither side wants any heat coming down on them about it. It's turned into kind of like, the Apaches only have to ambush you so many times before you get the idea that they're not letting the Wells Fargo coach through this pass, right?
All right.
So you just kind of have like an unspoken agreement, like, yeah, okay, we're not going there, and hopefully you're not going to come here and get us. So yeah, this is going to be great as it spreads to other cities.
Our Bay Area has had a lot of smash and grab robberies lately that I've noticed in the news. We had a guy crash a car into the Yves Saint Laurent. I'm not saying that correctly. It's a high-end fashion. So he actually crashed the car. They crashed the car into the store, like the front windows, and then made off with some merchandise. And we had this gang of this trio of these guys made me laugh. Let me see. Apple Store robberies. These guys hit the same store, I want to say 5 times in 3 days or 4 days. They let's see. And they ended up with like $20,000 worth of merchandise. I mean, that stuff is expensive. But one of them is dressed in like this really long kind of it looks like a dress, and I think it's San Jose Sharks licensed gear, because it's got like shark teeth, mouth open, shark jaws all over it. But it's really long, goes down to his knees. Like, do people who wear sweatshirts down to their knees like that? I don't know. So, but these guys hit the Apple Store at least twice in one day, and then 2 more times. So I've noticed this is a trend in our greater Bay Area, a smash and grab.
Well, they're demonstrating work ethic there.
Yeah.
If you want to use Baltimore and Detroit as like your watermarks for how things devolve. And who knows if pacing ever stays the same because our technology and culture seems to change more quickly now because of the social media stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking what you're describing there. That's early 1980s Baltimore.
Oh, wow.
That's Baltimore 1980. That's Baltimore 1984.
4 times in 6 days, 3 guys. And we're talking about Berkeley, which Berkeley is not the demographic of these 3 fellows, but Oakland is, which is close by. So these are probably, raiders from the neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, most of your crime in Baltimore counties of this type is committed by people from deep in Baltimore City. Sure. I mean, that's how many times can you rob your neighbor before he doesn't have anything left?
All right. This Apple store keeps getting restocked because they hit it 4 times in 6 days.
That's great. So this is great. If you think about it, when people first came to this continent, they're following the mammoths and hoping that the great mammoth deity is going to replenish the mammoths, and the mammoths will never go extinct. And these guys are obviously they're hunting outside of their neighborhood of origin, so they're living the nomadic predatory lifestyle as well. And there is a great mammoth god that will replenish the mammoths that they slay, because it's this corporation that's just designed to push product down to the retail outlet. Maybe some ancient Paleolithic hunter's dream was true, but he was just off by like 12,000 years.
That's a pretty good theory.
Because they were hunting mammoths out there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I published, the last time we talked, I had just published Cracker Boy, and
Yes.
and
It's on the bestseller list. We've sold 10 copies, right?
I think so, yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And then I published
Thanks,
The
guys.
Greatest Lie Ever Sold as well.
All right. Thank you for that. That's really cool.
Yeah, so The Greatest Lie Ever Sold is, I would characterize it as more narrative and less of the direct sources, where Cracker Boy is really a lot of the original sources that are annotated, and then The Greatest Lie Ever Sold is kind of more your narrative. So they go together. You're looking at close to 1,000 pages. They're both together with a lot of original sources and bibliography and stuff like that. So it's really heavy-duty history, but there's been a lot of interest in it, the Plantation America. There's more interest also in the pale-face topic, the white Indians topic. So that one is hotly anticipated. And then I also published The Letters from the Fall and Civilization Decomposes in the last few days. That went to press April 18th.
Oh, thank you. Send me the link to that so I can post it.
Yeah,
on the site.
it's in your mailbox.
Oh, that's really great. Now, the Civilization Decomposes is written by a colleague of mine, a man I've had a lot of email conversations with.
Jesse James Bowie, who resides in Texas.
And he wanted me to put my name on it so that they wouldn't find him in his hideout down there in Texas. It's a book of advice on how to survive the downfall of civilization.
Which is
it's
well
the kind
on
of
its
thing
way.
that Paladin. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that Paladin Press would have published every month, but now to publish something like that can get you in a lot of trouble. So, since I'm already in trouble, I attached, I guess my part of that's only about like 45 pages, right?
Yeah, you wrote it's a preface to Dr. Bowie's section, and so yours covered a lot of issues with regard to some stuff we cover a lot here, which is how to tell that your neighborhood is getting colonized or otherwise degrading into a hunting zone. And then once you find yourself in that hunting zone or in a real extreme kind of collapse situation, which is what Dr. Bowie goes more into more detail. It's a great resource. He gives a lot of sources from Europe and Australia and elsewhere in the world showing how much it's really going on, because it's easy to just sweep it away from view once the headline passes. It's easy to forget. So he's got a lot of resources there for if you ever wonder this attack or that murder, shooting spree, or whatever it was. He's got a long list of them there for your reference, and then really good kind of basics of like preparation and survivalism, and lots of other resources for you to look into, other books that he recommends. And he recommends a couple of James LaFond books, unsurprisingly. The Violence Project.
I'm glad you were able to help them out. I had something worthwhile to add.
Yeah, so that's a cute little book. It will be handy for you to have in hard copy for what's coming, undoubtedly. But it's almost 4 years since the events of Freddie Gray and related events in Baltimore. And
April 27th.
April 27th, yeah. Today's the 22nd, so we're almost a year, 4 years down. And that's when I first started reading your website. It was probably more like May when I started reading, or even June. I don't know. It was later because I was so curious about what was actually going on. And on another website, somebody linked to you about, here's a guy who's actually observing events and reporting on them faithfully, which is simply not something that journalists can do.
It's been edited out. Now there were no riots.
All right.
What is it now? Is it the Rising? Is that what it was? I thought it was 60 high school kids beating the shit out of 120 cops. But I guess I was looking the wrong way. But yeah, so the only thing that ended up in the news was the media show. There was anybody who goes back and looks at that and looks at these future riots. What I'd like them to keep in mind is whatever you're seeing on the media feed, the lines of riot cops and so on, that's all the media coverage. It's also all of the police coverage. When this stuff happens, what it is it's a way to concentrate the police in the one place, using a bunch of kids that aren't going to have to do serious time because they're minors, and then the adult criminals fan out and they conduct the purge. It's ongoing because the aftermath was further concentration of police because of negative press. And this affected outlying municipalities. Before the riots in Baltimore City, in eastern Baltimore County, I would see 2 police cars every night on my way to work. And I even got harassed by the police on my way to work. Now, after the riots, I would see 1 cop a month during that same time slot. And then it got to the point where on my last night going to work, of course there were no police. I was the only prey animal, and there were 4 hunters out there looking for me. In 2.5 years, it got from a situation where there was some deterrent policing going on and people could safely use the bus stops, to a situation where there was no deterrent policing and nobody even took the buses anymore because it was just too damn dangerous. And that's all the direct result of the changes in policing brought about by the riots that get recharacterized as uprisings. It's just a way of taking a police force that's largely an army of occupation and only does minimal deterrent policing, and then making it nothing but a besieged army of occupation that's not going to do any deterrent policing, because the type of policing that the real criminal hunters are most worried about is the deterrent policing. You know, a cop cruiser with a guy of that cruiser who thinks he's a good guy, just seeing something going down. You don't want something like that to be a risk when you're fanning out across the large metro area hunting people. And this stuff and the reports of all these individual incidents of people being hunted are almost all suppressed by the press and by the police. So this is what happens after, when your town gets a riot situation like Baltimore had, by the time it's recharacterized as an unrest or a rising, then you're in a hunting zone.
It's so interesting. I mean, you've written much more honestly and insightfully on the topic than anybody else in the public has. I mean, you were there.
And the thing is, everybody's getting hunted. This isn't a race war thing.
And it wasn't just, it wasn't just
everybody was getting hunted.
Those days, it wasn't, and it wasn't just the very days of the active hunting and riding, but the way that in the year after and still to today, the character of the city changed and the bus routes never recovered. And you were saying the other day that, you know, on a nice afternoon in Portland, you might see 50 pedestrians on the block, you know, and it's not even like a downtown block. It's just a retail zone. But you never, ever see that in Baltimore.
I might see 2 or 3.
Yeah.
You know, because it becomes totally different. And let me characterize it first. When the purge did start in Baltimore County and Baltimore City, it was basically all black on white. That's what was happening, okay? But that pale prey only lasted a week. And then the only thing left to hunt was the dark prey. And then it evened out. Then it went back. Typically in Baltimore City, through most of my life there, you're going to have the oppressed would attack maybe a pale person, and then they go attack 40 other oppressed people. And that was like the normal rate. You were always safer if you were the lighter color because you were associated with the power structure. But then once the power structure came under attack, then you become a fair game. And for a brief period, a friend of mine set the bones of 14 palefaces who were hunted by packs of ebony warriors. And he did this in like a 3-day period. Okay? So for a short period, it was like it was a hunt of a particular color by another color. But 2 weeks later, the hunt continued, and then it balanced back out. And instead of 40-1, you get like a 4-1 ratio, where, you know, the pale people are many times more likely to be attacked than they used to be, but the darker people are even more likely to be attacked than they used to be. So you get the dark people are being attacked at 3 times the rate, and the pale people are being attacked at 30 times the rate of previously.
Okay,
You
well,
know,
speaking of attackers, 2 men charged after allegedly attacking another man for wearing his Make America Great Again hat in Germantown. The wearer of the red hat of the evil racist President Trump, was an African man, a legal immigrant African man, and his 2 attackers were homegrown African American men.
And where did this happen?
Germantown. What is Germantown? Is that close to Baltimore or part of Baltimore?
I thought Germantown was a neighborhood in Philadelphia. I'm not sure, but it's probably Mid-Atlantic with that name. Yeah, we didn't have a Germantown neighborhood in Baltimore, but
Montgomery County.
There's a Germantown. Okay, so that's down. Okay, that's down near D.C.
Okay.
All right.
Not your territory, but still Maryland.
There's a place, Capitol Heights, Maryland, that has like the highest murder rate in the country.
Because
it's this little neighborhood
outside of D.C.
In fact, to go full circle, remember the story about the giant dude afraid of the poodle?
Yeah.
The guy that beat him up, the Mac Daddy, he was from Capitol Heights, Maryland. He belonged to a gang down there when he was a kid, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a tough neighborhood outside of D.C. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. But, in any society, nobody is more impacted by and more angry at immigration than the lower class. Who's ever on the bottom economic rung, they're the people that are going to be affected the most by immigrants coming in, because the immigrants are either taking over businesses, they're either coming in on the high end, or they're coming in on the low end. They generally have come in the middle. In a place like Baltimore, maybe in some suburban locations, you have like people from India coming in to like work in the medical field or something like that, and they're coming in the middle. But in the city, your immigration is either the Pakistani guy that bought out the Korean guy, and now you're dealing with a Pakistani to get your groceries, or an African guy that's coming in to drive a cab, which is a job that might have previously been open to you, but now he's going to be favored as a cab driver by the cab companies, because something like cab companies and floor cleaning businesses, they get colonized by people from third world countries. Like in 1 year, Brazilians took over like all the floor cleaning businesses in Baltimore. And in a brief period of time, Nigerians took over the cab business in Baltimore, because what they did is all the guys that belonged to the same church pulled their money, and they actually made this consortium. They had a handshake deal. We're all working together. We're going to go to this town, and we're going to take over the cab business. And then your local guys, they're not organized. Your local guys are all atomized individuals that have basically been screwed and alienated by the system, and then they resent us quite a lot. So you're not going to see any clean racial lines when it comes
They
to
also just resent the MAGA
violence.
hat. I mean, come on. They weren't thinking about, wow, this guy is driving a cab that I should have been driving. Nah, they just saw the red hat and they went for it. It's not that complicated.
Well, now there's two layers to it. There's the fact that they already want to kick his ass because he's an African. And then there's the fact that they could get away with it because he's wearing a Trump hat.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're looking for justification, and I'm not talking about justification from the police. They want justification from the people around them, the people that are going to see it. They don't want any interference, So at a distance, people might not realize that this is an African getting beaten up. But if from a distance they see he's got a red hat on, well, they know he's a traitor, even if they think he's a local dude. So to let it go.
Okay.
So you can't overlook the search for justification.
Yeah.
I mean, I survived for decades mainly because my attackers would seek to find the proper justifying moral purchase in their mind for doing me in.
And you denied it to them with your white devilish silence.
Yeah, the woke deviltry. Yeah. I've had guys literally begging me to,
call
to
them
say the
a
N-word,
dirty name.
Yeah.
Right.
So that then when the whole neighborhood could dance on my head, and I wouldn't do it. I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to see. You're going to see more of that. I've been party to a number of African American versus African immigrant violent situations, and these are usually a level of violence above the normal African American on African American thing. And I've seen it both ways, so I'm looking forward to some intensification of the violent matrix there. You've uplifted me again, Lynn. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad. I think I'm going to have to wrap it up here with episode 55. Thanks everybody for listening.
There is no more. If you find a place, please let me know. Take me with you when you go. Take me with you when you go. take me with you when you go.